Theology Corner.
All right.
Let's talk about shame. Let's talk about guilt. Let's talk about forgiveness,
Grief,
grief.
uh, sex and pleasure and
Yeah, I
the
mean, I
lack
guess
of shame.
that's the thing, right? The show is Fleabag, and this gets to the feminist piece that I think, is you're right to point out that, we're two dudes talking about this, but the feminist piece is her saying, um, you know what? I will do with my body whatever I want to do with my body, even if that means punishing myself for, you know, things that I feel like are unforgivable that I've done, you know?
Mhm. It feels like, is it too much to say that it feels like for her, some of this is punishment, like her, or is it coping or deflecting? Like just I would also say like kind of the madcap sexcapades is like, because she's not letting herself get close to anybody
Right.
like she was with Boo,
Mm-hmm.
which those flashbacks are beautiful. Um, yeah, there's so much going on there in the way that she's living her life that has everything to do. I mean, is she over who really gets over the death of a parent, but like maybe it's not just the death of her mother, it's that her father's marrying their godmother, which is just all sorts of weird. And then this thing with Boo, which she causes, I just you said redemption earlier. Does she find it? And like I think that's a word that's tossed around in conversations like this, especially around film and religion and stories and all that kind of thing. And people, I don't think it happens far less often than people give it credit for.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's redemption in the show for her? Like, and what does that look like in the show?
I don't know that she's redeemed at the end of the show. I don't know that she needs redemption, but I think that so spoilers, right? We've got to do spoilers for this part of the conversation, I think. But at the very end of the show, she says goodbye to us, the audience, right? She walks away from us and tells us not to follow her. So the way that I interpret that is that through whatever work that she and the priest have done over the course of that second season, she doesn't feel like she needs us, the coping mechanism, anymore. And she doesn't feel like she's in a place of sort of struggle, um, you know, what I mean, it's like lack of relationship, I guess, right? Like that's the thing. You're totally right to point out, like the way that she copes in the show is by not forming real relationships and not committing to anything. She doesn't commit to her coffee shop. She doesn't commit to like any of the people in her life. She doesn't even commit to her family, right? When Claire tries to hug her in the first episode, she's like, "What are you doing?"
But
Don't.
but in the start of the second season, business is booming at the cafe, much to everyone's surprise.
Yeah.
Um, but all of this revolves around, and it seems to be going okay in the first episode because they ask her at dinner and she's like, no, it's really fine. Of course,
Hmm.
they all assume it's not, but she reiterates. And then later, I think it's maybe an episode or two later, we see that in fact it's teeming with people.
Right.
And she's come up with really clever ways to draw people in, right? Loneliness is good business. She has Chatty
Hmm.
Wednesday, right? But I thought it was so cute. But it also coincides with her meeting the priest. So she doesn't commit to any sort of relationship. She shoves herself, she kind of closets herself away in grief um,
Yeah.
and guilt until the priest shows up. And this is who she falls madly in love with. And she
Yeah.
can't have it.
Right.
And so so for me, when she says goodbye to the audience and doesn't feel the need to have that coping mechanism anymore, and she walks away with her mother, with the bust of her the statue of her mother.
Mhm.
But what triggers that? Is it seeing the priest's commitment to a higher calling or to a relationship, or like something happens. I'm not doubting that, but I don't
Yeah.
know that it's crystal clear for us. I think there's, or is it, and I'm missing it, like.
I honestly, I do not think it's crystal clear, but I think that there's something repaired in the way that Fleabag sees the world, I think, through her relationship with the priest and through seeing and through them recognizing that like this isn't a relationship, but it was like what we had was healing in some way, right?
I think
Um,
it feels that way.
yeah.
Even though it's very brief, it feels that way.
And so and at that point, she doesn't need to tell us what she's feeling because she's able to reconcile whatever that is with
That's her
herself.
thing. That's
Now she
hers.
does send the fox after the priest. She
That's
sends
cute. He went that
she
way.
sends she sends his greatest fear after him because she knows that like whatever he's dealing with, he needs to face it, right? Like he needs to face this fox. Um but she doesn't need us anymore. And you're so right about the statue. I never even thought about that. It's the statue of her mother, but it's the statue of like her mother's torso, like her breasts and her core, which is like this sort of sustaining part of her mother, right? Is what she has left.
Yeah.
Which is really
And that's a
nice to
great
think about
scene. That's a
too.
great scene of kind of reconciliation or connection when Godmother says to her, it's good to have her back in the house.
Hmm.
Like there's this break in her kind of controlling personality for Godmother, and like that she really does respect, her and her mother, and kind of knows her place in that family. Even if it's just a glimpse, I think
Yeah.
that's really effective.
Yeah, to take it to like a 30,000 foot view, religion traffics in the business of working, and this is just sort of I'm going to use like Christian terminology and maybe non-Christian terminology as well, but like this idea of taking broken people and finding sort of healing and redemption like in the brokenness of life, right? The way that liturgically this gets expressed in Christianity anyway is like taking the body of Christ and like breaking it, the host that's used at communion. It's like this is Christ's body broken for you, and it's this idea that like God repairs like the brokenness in our own life, right? um this is what religions attempt to do, is sort of take broken people and make them whole again. I don't necessarily feel like that's how institutions always work, though. I think that
Yeah.
brokenness is hard, and I think walking the path of like redemption or forgiveness or all of that stuff is it is really difficult work. And frequently what I find with churches specifically is are institutions that are looking for perfect people to come in and stay perfect, you know, because we don't want to actually deal with the messiness of life.
Oh, hell no.
We just want
No.
like people to be
No.
wearing their Sunday best and acting their Sunday best while they're in this place.
Yeah, and this is, I think there's something more holistic and holy happening in Fleabag than ever has happened in most churches.
Right.
And yeah, and this idea of brokenness too is
Hmm.
problematic,
Yeah.
because this is a woman who's experiencing, and that word is so weird.
Hmm.
Like we're a toy that needs repairing, and not some sort of organic being moving through the world as best we can, dealing with the, I'm sorry to say, the shit of life. And
Hmm.
so, I just wonder, like, people would, there is a religious viewer who would watch and say, oh, she's incredibly broken.
Yeah.
No, she's not. No, she is a human being who is dealing with these profound emotions,
Right.
and who is equipped to do any better or different, like
Mhm.
innately. It takes community, right? It takes a priest, it takes a therapist, it takes a partner to move through life, or friend, whatever. Like, as if she was fixed, like there's a right way to do it or something. Like,
Right. I mean, that's the beauty of how the priest sort of helps her, right? Is this idea of, listen, you don't need forgiveness from God for whatever it is that you think you did wrong, or so, you need to forgive yourself for what you think you did to sabotage your relationship with your best friend. And you need to forgive yourself the death of your best friend and your mother, right? Like you're holding on to these two deaths, these two griefs, in a way
it's
that's preventing you from forming real relationships.
it's such a brilliant creative decision for the trauma
Mhm.
to be what it is. Because let's play that out another way. What if she goes to Boo and says, "Hey, I'm sorry, I was
Mhm.
the other woman."
Yeah.
Well, she's still walking out in traffic, or
Mhm.
maybe worse, right? Like, she doesn't want to lose that relationship, and so her inability to deal with the consequences of her actions lead to even worse situations,
Right.
right? At least if their relationship was ended or broken, by her admitting the truth of the situation, at least Boo's still there.
Mhm.
Maybe there's a world in which she's still there. And maybe there's a way in which that relationship over time can be repaired. Maybe,
Yeah,
but
or at
but she
least
doesn't do that, and so we never know, right? Because Boo makes the
yeah.
decision she makes, which is also like, Fleabag, you did not make her do that,
Right.
right? She made the choice to do that.
And that's the interesting thing about the show is that when we first meet all of the characters in the ensemble, like I said before, they're stuck in like a cycle of sort of what it is that they feel like they're supposed to do with their life. They're just kind of stuck. And what the priest allows Fleabag to do is to break that cycle, just like
Mm.
Fleabag allows Claire to break the cycle that she's in, right? Um,
That's
it's
such an
like,
interesting way to think about religious figures, and maybe what
oh my
a
gosh,
role
that's like
a
the whole
role
point of
could be.
religion, right? It's like,
Let's break
yeah,
the
it's like
cycle
the
of
Buddha's,
violence, of
yeah, the Buddha's
greed,
trying
of
to get you to break the cycle. Jesus is trying to get you to break the cycle. Like all
that's
these things, Muhammad is trying to get you to break the cycle.
that's
Everybody's
really
trying to
good.
get you out, right? Of
That's
like
good.
the
Yeah,
stuckness of life. Yeah.
yeah. Wow, that'd be an interesting conversation to have with her about that concept, that idea of like, is that something you thought about in writing the show?
Yeah.
And just what's the religious background too? Often, whenever I see a religious character handled so well in a series like this, like, what's your background? Like, who'd you talk to like really nail this? Because I think they do. I mean, I think Heretic, for example, which is out in theaters now. I think those guys, those writers, have deep religious they have to. It's so good. Like, and some of the stuff in that film are things you and I have talked about before, and that if you've been to divinity school in any capacity, you've had those conversations. So in some way, they're kind of like armchair theology, but they're still believable and effective. And I think it's because there's got to be a rich background there of kind of personal experience. And I
Yeah,
don't know, it feels like
probably.
maybe there's a little bit of that here, but or at least
Or
some great
just,
consultation.
and also don't discount curiosity and what role that
Fair
plays,
enough. Yeah,
right?
that's good.
Because especially in England, the Church of England is just so it's just such an afterthought for so many people's lives. At this point, it's more sort of tradition and ritual than it is like faith as an active part of
Yeah.
like, you
Yeah.
know, anybody's life in the UK.
Did,
But they have these old cathedrals and they have these old churches that purport to sort of help you, and I think that that's something that Phoebe Waller-Bridge is picking at here, is like, what if there's still magic in these old buildings, a little bit? That would be interesting, right? Yeah.